Hello, hello, hello. Hi. Hello, hello. Okay. So I want to before we start, I want to say hello and talk about where we're at and where we're going and how we've been doing. First of all, hi. You can see I'm at someplace colder. We're about the middle of Texas now. We moved to outside of San Antonio. It's a place called Lake Hills, and it's on something called Medina Lake. We're going to be here for 21 days. It is a lot colder than it was way down south. I'm cold. It's about 50 here now, which isn't terrible, but it's not, I was in 80s. So we are here at Medina Lake. There's a lot of good things. I'm really excited about where we're at. We're going to be here for 21 days. There's a lot more nature, and so you'll have to look because I'm outside in the screen room, and I'll try to show you if they come by. I was telling a foot of snow tonight. I was telling my admins earlier that it's really cool. The nature here is neat. The deer wander through. I keep wondering if they're here because I hear them. They wander through and they will eat right out of your hand and stuff. If you didn't see, I posted a couple videos on Facebook. I'll try to post a couple cool videos here on YouTube too, of them eating out of our hand and stuff. And apparently there's wild turkeys here too, which I have not seen that yet, but we just got here today and it takes a while for us to set up our camp and stuff. So I didn't have a whole lot of me time, exploring time. So that's really neat. I'm excited to be someplace. First of all, that is a little colder because Imbolc is almost here. Imbolc is the first. And I haven't really felt like the changing of the seasons has happened very much because we left. I mean, we had a little bit of winter, but we left and we really chased the sun down to the very southmost point you could go pretty much in America, which is, right off the Mexico border. Hi, Leanne. And everyone, I meant to say hello, everyone. Hi, Fatima. So it was really warm where we were, which was kind of nice, but I missed the changing of the seasons stuff. And so the fact that Imbolc is almost here, to me, I'm like, okay, I did not feel enough of winter to feel like it should be Imbolc already. So I'm kind of glad to be here because of that. I'm really glad because it's a little bit more out in nature here, which I really love. I have an opportunity to explore something that I'm excited to explore, but sad that I get to explore it. So we're on this, I told you, Medina Lake. We're here at Medina Lake. The problem is that Medina Lake is dried up now. There is no lake here. And there are, if you look at, this is called Thousand Trails Medina Lake, I think it's called. And so if you look at pictures, you Google pictures of Thousand Trails Medina Lake, it was a beautiful lake, like a big, huge, beautiful lake here. And it's all dried up. They've dammed part of it up near San Antonio more. They've taken a lot of the water for San Antonio and for businesses and stuff like that. And they have literally dried up these people's lakes. It was a big lake. So it's really sad. It's they have this big movement called Save Medina Lake. You can find them on Facebook. Where they're trying to say, there's businesses along the lake and there's wildlife everywhere down here, and they're having a hard time because now not only is the lake dried up, but their wells are going dry around here. So they're having a really hard time with water. So it's a good lesson in conserving conserving our resources, our natural resources, because that was not done here, and it's a big problem for these people. What that means is I get to explore this huge pit, this huge, massive, I don't know how many acres it is, but it's this land mass now that used to be a lake very recently. So I'm going to go down starting tomorrow and kind of walk through what used to be the lake and just see what I can find. I'm kind of curious. There's all kinds of stuff, I'm sure, different stones and stuff that I can find there that I wouldn't normally have the opportunity to do. So again, that's cool, but also really sad. Like I went down to the lake shore where it used to be, the edge of the lake, and there's shells all at the edge of the lake, like, a beach. It's very, it's weird, and it's sad, that, our country is not conserving the resources that it should be. But again, it's something I will try to do what I can while I'm here, and we'll see what happens. I don't know. I'm sure I'll be doing more videos about what I find down there and, what we experience here. Like I said, the deer around here they like will eat from your hand. So, like all the bodies they were finding near Vegas, right? Well, I hope I don't find bodies. Shush, Michelle. I didn't even think of that. I was thinking like cool stones that were underwater and like skeletons of fish and stuff, which, ew, but I mean, stuff I can use, in witchcraft practice, and ew, I was not thinking of bodies, Michelle. That's hilarious. Okay. All right. So, having said that, here we are. Do you still have dreams of buying land? Yes, absolutely. The witchy commune. Yes, I still do. Definitely want to do that someday. Right now, life has led us in a very different path, but maybe it's because I'm supposed to buy the land someplace else. And we're kind of traveling the country looking at different land masses and different areas. And so definitely. Okay, so like I said, day one is a lot of setup. We're kind of setting up our camp and stuff still, but I'll be doing more videos as we go. Okay, as far as the book goes, so let me, before we start talking about the book, not in Texas. Yeah, I can almost guarantee you it won't be in Texas. Although I have to say, I like Texas a lot more than I thought I would have, for the most part. There's things that I don't like about Texas. And there's things that I do like about Texas. The people are very, very nice and good people. And I like that for the most part, we haven't had to have political discussions, which is good, because I'm sure my politics are not what most of the people that I am encountering down here are. There are a lot of things I don't like my ADD meds. I cannot have my ADD meds down here because Texas has a law that it's a controlled substance, and you can only fill the controlled substance from a Texas doctor. Be sure to invest in a big old white truck. Yes, because apparently they all have white trucks down here. There is like more white trucks than any other vehicle. So yes, there's lots of things that I like and lots of things that I dislike. So anyway, all right. The book. This was a great chapter. This was a long, before we start details, squirrel. Before we start details, let me say, as a spoiler, if you have not read chapter 3, we are in chapter 3 of The Mists of Avalon from Marion Zimmer Bradley. We have a PDF that you can look up if you don't have a physical copy of the book, and you can also listen to a wonderful woman who is reading it on YouTube, the audio, which I love her. and many, many, many of the names and stuff that I have been pronouncing wrong the entire time. I love hearing the correct pronunciation. But spoilers, we are going to be discussing all about chapter 3, all about what happens, and all about why it happened. So if you have not read it, you may want to stop this video here and read the chapter before, because we're going to be talking all about it. Okay, yes, it was a much longer chapter than we have read so far. Which means I'll be honest, as we get towards the end of the chapter, I have less questions because I didn't have enough time to go through and create questions. Usually creating questions is the last thing I do. I read it and then I listen to it and read it at the same time. And then I go through it again and do questions. And I had done everything but make the questions today, but we got here and had to set up camp and stuff. So the questions, I didn't get a chance to make as many questions as I would have liked for this long chapter, but I do want to talk a lot about it because it's a super important chapter and a lot happens in this chapter. Okay, and I brought 2 different lanterns this time in case it gets dark, because it's getting darker sooner than, well, not sooner, but it's getting darker when we're in the midst of our speaking. Okay, so what happens? Let's, before we even start, the first question I think has to be what we ended with really last time, which was Vivian had told Igraine that she had to figure out how to go to Londinium with her husband Gorlois. And we were like, okay, we'll have to see, how did she do that? So the first question has to be, how did she do that? How did Igraine get Gorlois to take her to Londinium with him? Okay, and the answer is, she really didn't. She didn't have to do anything, did she? The answer is Gorlois came back from the battle. He came home and basically invited her, said to her, hey, so Ambrosius, the king, is going to die, and a lot of the king's generals basically are going to be bringing their wives and stuff because there'll be a big panel. She didn't, exactly. There'll be a big panel to discuss who's going to be the next king. Do you want to come to Londinium? She didn't even have to bring it up. So, whew, that was a big, easy answer. It's funny, so many times in this chapter, I have to say that I kept thinking, yep, so there's another obstacle that is kind of in her way that, nope, that's not an obstacle anymore. It's the universe kind of moves things in place when you're on your fate's destiny's path, that you don't have to necessarily figure stuff out, right? Sometimes you realize that this was the path you were supposed to be on because the road suddenly opens and there isn't as many obstacles in your way. And as hard as it seems that it's going to be, you get to that moment in time and ta-da, the universe opens it up for you. And that's something that I think we need to learn in our own lives, is to trust that when we are on the correct path, the universe says, oh yeah, this is the way you're supposed to go. And oh, you were all worried about this thing, but guess what? Clink, I'm just going to move this thing over here and it opens it up for you so that you don't have to worry about that. That is not something. It was that easy. She panicked. Exactly. She was like, I'm never going to be able to get to do this. How am I going to do this? And so again, one of the lessons is maybe not panic so much. Maybe not have, and I know, believe me, as I sit here, after my RV was broken down for that long, and I was like, I don't know what we're going to do. We're going to starve to death. We have no place to live. And the universe, as anxious as I was and as awful as it was, and it was very anxiety riddled, the universe says, here, these people out of nowhere are going to say, would you like to live in our RV while you're waiting for your RV to get fixed? And things just happen when you're on the correct path. That makes it so it opens it up. So it's something we have to remember in our own lives, I think, is that when you're on the right path, we have to learn to trust more. A lot easier said than done, I know, but we can try to learn to trust a little more. I'm trying. It's a daily process, I'm telling you. Okay. All right, so that was the first question was, yep, that was that easy. She didn't even have to do anything. That's easy. The next question I had was, Igraine has before Gorlois even comes home, she has another vision. And she describes it. Just wait, a solution will come. That's right. She describes it. We know that Igraine has the sight, or at least a little bit of the sight, as most people. I think she didn't want it to be so easy. Yeah. Because she kind of was like, okay, it's going to be really hard. There's no way that I'm going to be able to do this. And again, Stephen, in a lot of this, you see that Igraine is like, oh yeah, this is never going to happen. I'm not going to like Uther. Uther is going to be this big, and then, he really doesn't seem to be that bad. And oh, he's kind of nice looking. And oh, look at that. Our legs are right next to each other and there's heat. So we'll talk about that. Yes, she sees his death shade. That's right. And it's called, what is it called? Does anybody remember what it's called? Because that's a specific term that is used. It's actually it's in Irish lore. It's called a fetch. Ascending is actually different. Ascending is when I, who have the sight, send a message or an image or something to Stephen across the pond in England there, who also has the sight. That's called ascending. The fetch is actually a portent of death. And I think I have a question about that, don't I? Oh, it's called the fetch. Yeah, that's what my thing was. So yes, ascending was when she saw Vivian, because Vivian specifically sent her image and the Merlin's image, Taliesin, to her. The fetch is an exact spectral, meaning ghost-like double of a living human being, and it's regarded as a portent of death, of their looming death. So, and it's called a fetch, and it has happened. It's called a couple of other things. In Germanic culture, they call it a doppelganger. If you see your doppelganger, they don't always see that as a portent of death. But if you see your doppelganger in Germanic cultures, very often that is a similar thing. In Irish lore, it's called a fetch, and it is a portent of death. So if you see their double in ghost form and they're still alive, that means for them that their looming death is coming. And she doesn't want to see this. And she's trying to think, when we see things that society deems as not real, we try to push it away and we try to make it seem like it wasn't anything. When we see very often, when you first start out opening your third eye and you start seeing spirit and stuff like that, you will see it out of the corner of your eye normally in your peripheral vision over here. And so you think you explain it away. That's the word I'm looking for. You say, oh, it wasn't really there. That wasn't really what I thought I saw. That was nothing. That was a shadow from a car passing. That whatever it was, that was not spirit standing over in this peripheral vision. And very often you will get that in your peripheral vision before you get to look at it. And I will tell you that for me, when I started seeing that, my biggest thing was there's a hint of fear, no matter what. No matter who you are, you rationalize it. Yes, that's the word. Definitely. No matter who you are, if you see a figure in your peripheral standing there that you know not to be there in physical form, there is fear there because it's the unknown, right? Even if you're my son who was born with this ability, your initial reaction is, holy fuck, what is that? Right? So what happens is, I love it. There's coyotes. Love it. What happens is you have to get over your initial fear to look at it and know that it's going to be there before it actually is. And for I bet you a good year, when I had opened my third eye and had like actively been working on seeing spirit, by the time I remembered that I wanted to do this, spirit wasn't there anymore. So I thought, well, this isn't working. Am I only and sometimes that's it. Sometimes you will only get in your peripheral, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. But it's like training your mind to get over that initial, oh fuck, what the hell is that over there in this corner of my eye thing? And to go, okay, I want to look at this spirit so I can actually see what it looks like. And I have to turn on my logic mind. My logic mind goes click, and I'm like, okay, is it wearing something? And I'm like trying to, instead of look at the spirit, I'm trying to, what is it wearing? Is it holding anything? Do I sense anything? Do I smell anything? Do I hear anything? I have to like click this thing on so that as I slowly look, a lot of times it won't disappear. Sometimes it still does. A lot of times it won't disappear. So that is something, that we all do as humans is rationalize. Oh, I didn't see that. That was something it was a shadow. I must have fallen asleep. I was dreaming. There's no way that I saw this portent of death of my husband because I really don't want to have to go through this. Now, here's the other thing. Igraine has gone through what she considered to be this very traumatic experience. At 15, she was married to a man who was at least double her age. And she had to figure out and a different religion. He was a Christian, and she was born on the Isle of Avalon. And she had to figure out how to live and what was allowed and what was supposed to be done and how their mass went and deal with this father guy who's, super judgmental and all that kind of stuff. So she had a lot to deal with. And then Vivian comes back and Taliesin comes back and says, oh, that was great. Now you're going to move on to another one. And she's like, kiss my ass. I got through this. I know my husband now. I actually like him. I think he's a decent guy. And now you're going to make me go and start over already? Really? Are you? She's not happy about this. So she really has to, she's trying to say, nah, this isn't what's supposed to happen. Okay. So, all right. So as they go on this trek to Londinium. And she kind of likes the whole track, and it's a nice track. They go through. They talk about the people who are up for king, like the candidates, if you will, for king, and who they are, a little bit about who they are, and Igraine says, okay, well, who do you want? I've heard you talk about this lot of Orkney guy. I've heard you talk about this Urians of North Wales, to replace Ambrosius, who they know is dying. And they talk about, I didn't really talk about this, and it's a little bit later, but he has yellow eyes, right? So he's probably jaundiced. He's probably dying something of the liver is my guess. You couldn't have a nicer video background. Thank you. Isn't it beautiful? I do like it a lot. The soldiers make her feel pretty. She's at ease. She feels comfortable with the situation she's in. She's learned how to deal with what she's had in front of her now. And she asks him, who will you support for the next High King? And who is it? Who does Gorlois support for the next High King, and why? It's kind of funny to me that Gorlois is not happy about this person. He's not in love with this person. Uther. That's right. and he supports Uther because he is loyal to Ambrosius, and Ambrosius's choice is Uther. So because as far as Gorlois is concerned, Ambrosius has chosen Uther, and that's who he would like to succeed him. So being the loyal servant of Ambrosius, he says, I'll support whoever Ambrosius chooses. And he has reasons for why he both likes, there's things he likes about Uther, and there's things he doesn't like about Uther. And I did want to kind of go through them and talk about them, because it gives us, before we even meet Uther, it gives us kind of a vision of what we can expect with Uther before he comes into the picture, right? So, and remember that Igraine is hearing this and knows that this is the man. This is the man that Vivian has told her, you're going to be marrying this guy, and he's going to father your children. So this is the first she's really hearing of Uther. What is he like? What is this Uther guy like? And this is what she first hears of Uther. Uther is Ambrosius's man, but he doesn't like him because he's too much like a Saxon. Right. It's as simple as that. Not that I like Uther. He's a lecherous man with a dozen bastards. Okay, so he's kind of a playboy, right? He sleeps around a lot. He kind of looks at everyone's women. He's kind of a playboy. No woman is safe around him. He goes to mass because the army does. In other words, he's not really a pious man, according to Gorlois. He doesn't see him as a pious man. And because it's the thing to do. I'd rather he was an honest pagan than a Christian for the benefits he can get from it. So the reasons he doesn't like him. He's kind of a playboy. He sleeps around. He's got a dozen bastards all over, meaning he's not married, so he has all these kids from women that he slept with. He goes to mass because that's the thing to do, because the army goes to mass. That's what we do. The army goes to mass. He's not really necessarily that enthralled with the mass, and but he goes because that's what he's supposed to do. And she said he's 3/4 pagan, right? And she says, but you support him. There's all these things you don't like about him, but you support him. And he says, oh yeah, well, he's soldier enough for a Caesar. The men will follow him through hell if they have to. He spares no effort to be popular with the army. You know, the kind of thing, going around the camp and munching on their rations to make sure they're fit to eat. Spending a day when he could be taking his ease, going to the quartermaster's to get a discharge for an old toothless veteran. Sleeping in the field with the men before a battle. The men would die for him, and they do. And he has both brains and imagination. He managed to make peace with the treaty troops and get them to fight alongside us last fall. He thinks a little too much like a Saxon for me. He knows how their minds work. Yes, I'll support him, but that doesn't mean I like the man. So there's a lot of good things about him too. He sleeps with his men. He makes sure that the men that are under his care are cared for. And to me, that's wonderful. I love that. I think that's fantastic. To me, that's much better than he goes to church and is very pious because he loves their Lord and stuff, right? But to Gorlois, who is a Christian through and through, it's not something he would rather he was just, a pagan and just said he was a pagan. He might like him even more. But he does, you can tell he respects him. He respects him because of how he honors his troops. So that's a good thing. And that tells us a lot about Uther before we even meet him. Okay, number 4. What does Gorlois say he'd like to do instead of being High King? So they go through, they have this conversation, and then Igraine says to him, you don't want to be High King? I mean, here you've been a trusted, faithful person to him. And in her mind, you can hear her thoughts sometimes. She's thinking, well, if it has to be, that I have to birth this next king thing, maybe it can be Gorlois. Maybe I can just stay with my husband. We'll birth this next king guy, and he'll, be the savior of Britain. Yeah, because she knows, even though, and she's thinking, and I saw his death already, so I know he's close to death. This is really probably not going to work. But she's like, "Don't you want to be king?" And he's like, "Oh hell no, I don't want to be king." That's leave that for younger men. I'm done with that shit. It's enough is enough. He says, "I want a son to play with my daughter, and some time to spend in peace, fishing from the rocks and hunting and sitting in the sun, watching the peasant folk bring in their crops. Sit on the back porch and watch the kids play, yes, and time perhaps to make my peace with with God, so that he may forgive me for all the things I've had to do in my life as a soldier." So Gorlois, is not a bad guy. I feel for him. And the fact that he's older now, which is hilarious. He's really like 34, I think they say, or something. He's not like old. He's like 34. But he's in this time, he's older and he's been at war all his life for Ambrosius. And he's done with this shit. He's like, I'm too old for this shit. I want to sit back. I want to relax. I want to be in peacetime. I want to watch my kids grow up. I want to go fishing. The simple things in life. That's really what I want. I don't want all this fancy shit. I don't need to be a hero. I don't need to be the king. That's just a huge pain in the ass. He's tired. He's tired, exactly. And he says to her, you only say you would be queen because you're young. You don't understand all the responsibilities that come with being queen. It's a whole lot of shit. So they have this discussion, and then they go to bed. And we see that Igraine is being very nice to Gorlois. She goes to his bedside, without him asking. She caresses his cheek. She touches his hand. She suddenly kind of realizes at one point, she's like, am I doing this because I know he's dying? No, he's been a good man. He's been good to me. It's not just that I know he's dying, but some of it is like, wow, you're not that bad. You've always been good to me. You've always been kind. And she's looking at him a lot differently now because here we are. And she knows that his time is almost up and she feels bad about it. So then Igraine dreams of Avalon. And she has quite the dream about Avalon. Why do you think she dreams this dream? Let's talk about. The king is bugged more in peace than yeah, right? Exactly. So this dream, this is what it says. But towards morning, she fell into a fitful sleep, dreaming of a world in the mist, of the shoreline of the Holy Isle, receding further and further in the mists. It seemed to Igraine that she was rowing on a barge, heavy and exhausted, seeking for the Isle of Avalon, where the goddess, wearing Vivian's face, was waiting to ask her how well she had done what was required of her. But although the shoreline was familiar, and the groves of apple trees which had grown on the shore when she came up to the temple, a crucifix stood in the temple of her dream, and a choir of the black-robed nuns of the Christians was singing one of their doleful hymns. And when she began to run, looking everywhere for her sister, the sound of church bells drowned out her cries. She woke with a stifled whimper, a sleeper's scream, and sat up to hear the sound of church bells everywhere. So she has a nightmare. She has a nightmare that she's on the barge, going through the mists. She gets to Avalon, and she sees the shores of Avalon with the apple trees, and it's a little different. And she calls out to her sister Vivian, and she cannot find her, and she's panicking. The dream confirms what Vivian and Merlin told her. Yes. So again, part of the sight thing for me, I think this is kind of another vision. Told her what was at stake, right? It kind of guilts her. There's this portent of what could happen if she denies that this is her fate and she turns away and does not accomplish what the Merlin and Vivian have told her is so important to Avalon and to all of Britain. This is what could happen. She could end up trying to get to Avalon and it's not there anymore. the Christians have taken it over, and she can't actually get to the Isle of Avalon. Yes, yes, yes. He's trying to please her, and she wishes she realized this, as it would have made her first years less sucky, right? Yes, and she's looking back at these years that she thought was so awful, and she's like, "Oh, it wasn't really that bad if I had just accepted my fate." And that's, I think, a key thing too, is that she's thinking, if I had just accepted my fate, look how things would have gone. So now, is she maybe starting to think, if I just accept my fate, maybe it'll go better? I don't know. Will it be better? Will it not be better? It's a tough thing, right? No matter what, either way, it's tough. It's tough. Either way. Okay. Number 6. Okay. So I skip ahead a little bit, but I don't want to skip ahead too much. So they get to Londinium. Londinium is overcrowded. Igraine kind of hates Londinium, right? Because she's used to growing up at the Isle of Avalon, which is kind of like this campground. It's very outdoors, and it's all about nature, and there's space. And she gets to Londinium. Look how hard it is for us when we resist our guides. Yes, Stephen, so much, because our guides keep kicking us in the face and going, "Hello, do you not get this?" Londinium is awful. There's people upon people upon people, and she starts to feel like they're all closing in on her, right? And she's like, "I don't even think I can breathe in here. What the fuck is this place? It's awful." The streets are filled. Later she talks about the streets smell of piss, kind of, because people just pee in the streets, and they leave their bedpans out in the street. Yes, and it stinks, and there's dogs everywhere and people everywhere, and she's used to open air, and so she's like almost panicked at first. I really don't like this Londinium place. This kind of is awful. Yes, London is like that. I have not been to London, so it's how sad that it hasn't changed. But I assume it's kind of like New York City. New York City, I love New York City in many ways, but New York City is full of way too many people, and it kind of has this faint scent of urine everywhere. It really does. My husband says that all the time. It smells like pee. Okay, so they get to this house. They're staying at a soldier's house, one of Gorlois' soldiers, and a messenger comes with a package, and it is the moonstone that Vivian took from her. And Gorlois is immediately suspicious. He's a Christian man, and who is this man, this messenger, bringing a gift for my wife? Who are you, and who are you from? And even when it's from her sister, he's like, well, why is she bringing you this gift? And I have people who could, and she lies and says, not faint, very strong, I'm from New York City. Okay, see, it is very strong. It depends on where you're at in New York City, but sometimes it is a bit overwhelming, yes, especially like in the subways. But she lies, and she says, the setting, I wanted them to fix the setting, wasn't quite right. It was turned a little or something. So, and he's like, I have people who could fix the setting. You didn't have to send it out to your sister. And so he like scolds her too. And she's like, oh, great. Now I have 2 people scolding me. I'm supposed to be an adult. Back the fuck off, So remember, Vivian took Penn Station, right? Yes. Vivian took the moonstone as a favor to her, because Igraine says to her, I don't know if I can do this again. I don't know if I can do this again. And Vivian's thought is, okay, I'm going to take this moonstone, and when I give it back, remember your promise. So do you think that probably Vivian has done something to this moonstone, right? There's some kind of charm now. It is a charm, or there's some kind of energy around it. Or, yes, repairs the clasp. Yes, exactly. There's some kind of energy around the moonstone at this point, don't you think, that Vivian has put on it so that it's a bit easier for her sister. and it's perhaps a bit easier for her sister and perhaps a bit easier for Uther also. So there's kind of like a love spell on the moonstone. And we see that when Uther finally comes into the picture. We'll talk about that. We're almost there, I think, where Uther's kind of staring at it. So then they go to church. They have to go to church in the morning. They have to go to mass with Ambrosius. This is her chance to meet Ambrosius at church. They go to church, and she looks at all the people. She doesn't know who any of them are, but she kind of guesses who a couple of them are. She gets a couple right. She gets a couple wrong. She thinks that Uther is a big lug. He kind of comes in and interrupts church, right? Hi, Kay. Uther comes in and kind of interrupts church, and she doesn't know that it's Uther, and she's like, who is this fair-haired idiot walking in, interrupting church? And everyone's looking at him, and then, of course, he kneels right next to her. And he's staring at her chest, which cracks me up. I have to say, it's funny to me that he comes in and he stares at her chest. And she... So sorry to be that person. Yes, Sade. And if you go back to the original videos, we talk about why we chose this book and why we chose to continue this book. So if you have questions, you can go back and watch the original video. So yes, clumsy oaf. Absolutely. He's clumsy. She's like, oh, this guy is ridiculous. What the hell? And he stares at her chest, and she has just gotten up and gotten communion. If you were ever Catholic, you know communion, the communion wine and the little biscuit that, tastes like hell. And she thinks, of course, her first thought, I have to say, I laughed out loud because her first thought was not, he's looking at my breasts. Her first thought is, oh shit, I spilled communion wine on my dress, which is so something I would do. So now, once again, Igraine, I connect to Igraine because that is so something I would do. We don't look at ourselves as, attractive women. Usually we're like, oh shit, what did I do? Where is it? I spilled something. But it turns out that he was staring at the moonstone. He was staring at the moonstone necklace that Vivian gave her for her wedding and then took away, enchanted, and gave back. He was staring at the moonstone. And, by the way, Gorlois also catches him staring at what he believes is her breasts. So in the final Psalms at Mass, which let's get to the final Psalms at Mass, because this was funny to me. They get through, this Mass. In the final Psalms at Mass, the teaching is that fear of the Lord is the beginning of what? And I do this because I have to post the picture, but it says this. This is the reading of the Psalm. He has sent redemption among his people in accordance with his eternal covenant. His name is holy and terrible. Wisdom, that's right. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, which is hilarious because on my way down here I am in Texas, on my way here today or yesterday, I can't remember if it was today or yesterday, but I saw a little sign on this little gas station that said, fear God. And I thought, really? We're still there. That's really where I'll post it in the event page so you can see. Cause I posted it to my admins cause I'm like, we're still here. Are we really? It's ridiculous. But yeah, so back then, keep in mind, and still now apparently in a lot of places, they want you to fear God. They really think that their God should be feared, that he is, this. And that's why I've always had a hard time, I think, partly why, is that their God is vicious and doles out punishment. And that just isn't who I believe deity to be. And I've always had an issue with that. So this book is good at pointing that out. I will say that. It's very good at pointing out that that's not necessarily what we think of when we think of deity. Okay. Ambrosius. So then we get to meet, they leave mass. We get to meet Ambrosius. Ambrosius is very good. Do we think Ambrosius is a good king? Absolutely. I think Ambrosius is a great king. I think there's several things that happen in this talk, and I hope that you really paid attention to the talk. I don't have a lot of questions about the talk back and forth at the table, but when she meets Ambrosius, he says, your husband tells me that you are a daughter of the Holy Isle, the Isle of Avalon. And she says, yes, I am. And he says, some of your people are advisors at my court. My priests do not like it that your druids should be placed on equal footing with them. But I tell them, you both serve the great ones above us, by whatever name. And wisdom is wisdom, however come by. I sometimes think your gods demand wiser men for their servants than our God for his. He made a similar comment at the priests. Yes, at the priests he did. Yes. She just met him, but yeah, she already loves him. Yes. So it's interesting to me that he is very open to her religion and how she grew up and what she thinks. Much more so than Gorlois is, right? He's a little bit more open about things. Also, when they go back and forth and they do this thing at his side back and forth, they talk about where the battle has been and what kind of strategies they are all thinking of. And at first it may seem, I don't want to say boring, because I don't think it's boring, although I have to really pay attention, because that to me is less emotion and more logic. So I have to really set it out. He's saying this and he's saying this and this is why. But take the time to do that if you haven't yet, because it's really interesting and it shows us how each of these people think. And we see most of these people we will see again and are a part of this book in other ways. So it helps us to see how they think and, where they're coming from. And they all have decent ideas on stuff, just they're coming from different directions sometimes, like anything, right? The priests are not known for their wisdom. Yes, not at all, which is really funny. She thought, why? Uther loves the king. Yes, she realizes that when Uther comes in, that Uther really loves his king. And Gorlois has kind of, other people have mentioned, and it has looked like Uther is just here to take advantage of the fact that the king wants him to be the next king. And you see immediately, and Igraine sees immediately, that Uther really loves this guy. This is not somebody that he doesn't hardly know, or he's very careful when he hugs him that he's not hurting him because he knows he's sick and dying. And so she says, why Uther loves this king. It's not just ambition. Yes, he does like to make an entrance, which it totally cracks me up. His entrance here, Gorlois would have given up his place. So Gorlois was sitting next to Ambrosius, but of course Uther comes in again late. He comes in after everybody else is already there. Uther stretches his long leg across the bench, climbs across to slide into a seat beside Igraine. And she drew up her skirts, feeling awkward as he stumbled. How clumsy he was, like a big friendly puppy, right? She's like, oh, this guy, he's like a puppy. What is with this guy? He had to put out his hand to save himself from falling directly on top of her. Perfect night for a book club as there's a raging snowstorm. Yay! Forgive my clumsiness, lady, he said, smiling down at her. I'm all too big to sit on your lap. So he's just a happy-go-lucky, I see it as Ty, the puppy with the dogs. Yes, and he almost falls on her. Exactly. He's hilarious. Against her will, she laughed up at him. Even your dogs are too big for that, my Lord Uther. And he helped himself to bread and fish, offering her the honey. She says, I don't like sweets. And he says, you have no need of them. And then she notices again that he was staring at her bosom, at her breasts again. And then she realizes, oh, no, he's staring at the moonstone again. And she says, has he never seen a moonstone before? Why does he keep staring at this moonstone? And she realizes that now she's looking at him, and she says he's tall and fair. His skin is firm and unwrinkled. So, he's this big clumsy oaf, and he's kind of handsome in a way, and his skin is unwrinkled, and he's got this firm skin, and she can smell his sweat, clean and fresh as a child. So not stinky old man sweat, but like a child's sweet sweat. You know what that is? And yet he was not so very young, so he's not a child. He's actually an adult, and he's kind of handsome. And all of a sudden, she's kind of conscious of the fact that he's a little handsome. And have you ever had that crush and your hands touch and you feel that jolt of, oh, he's kind of nice looking. Look at that. Look at that bicep he's got. And look at, Igraine starts to notice this. And we see again, could this be the moonstone? Absolutely. Could be the moonstone's effect. That Vivian has created this charm of the moonstone, and this is part of the effect of that. It could also be that the universe knew what it was doing, that the fates that were happening were such that Igraine had to be kind of attracted to this guy, and she doesn't want to go through this weird thing again where she doesn't know somebody, and now she has to go to some other guy, and at least this time maybe he's not so bad looking. Maybe she kind of laughs at him, and maybe she's going to start to admire him and all this. So they go back and forth. There's a lot of talk about the war and what happens, who wants what for the war, right? Uther, his take on the war is he wants to send troops to the summer country. The summer country is where Avalon is. And suddenly we realize that the Merlin is there, that Taliesin is there at the table. And Uther says, I think we should make our main stand in the summer country. Then in winter, they will not be able to come down to sack our camps like they did 3 years ago, for they won't know their way around our islands. And Ambrosius kind of agrees. Some of the others say, no, my people won't go down and set up camp down there. And no, they don't want to do that. And Urian says something else. And so there's a lot of back and forth. And it, like I said, I'm not going to go through all of their strategies, although it would be interesting to do so because it's freezing out here and we've almost been on an hour. But please make sure you do go through their strategies just to kind of see who's got what going on. Lot, who will become much more important than he is right now. Lot says, I think the first and best thing to do would be to drive forth the Saxons from within our own kingdoms and then fortify ourselves. So rather than go down and do this in the summer country, first we should get rid of the Saxons that are here. What's funny is Ambrosius says, no, we can't do that. Now, he's talking about the Saxons have been there and they have given them land and they have lived among them. And a lot of them have been converted into Christians by this point. And Ambrosius, at least he recognizes that. Again, this is why he's a good king. He says, I don't think we can do that. They have lived here since their fathers and grandfathers and great grandfathers' time. Some of them, unless we are willing to kill them all, they will not leave their land. They have a right to call their own, nor should we violate the treaty. So Lot is like, let's drive all these Saxons that we've let live here for generations. Let's drive them out. If we want to keep the Saxons out, we got to start with who we have internally. And Ambrosius is like, okay, no. We already have a treaty with them. They've lived here for generations. We are not going to kick those people out of the country. They have tilled this land. They live on this land. This is their land now. We're not going back on what we said. So at least he has a good mind in what he's doing, right? They continue their discussion, and they talk about the fact that they have converted some of these Saxons to Christianity. If we fight amongst ourselves, Ambrosius continues, if we fight amongst ourselves here within the shores of Britain, a lot of Orkney, yeah, he is kind of a slime ball. And again, he becomes a lot more important and super annoying. I won't say anything else because that's going ahead, and I won't do that. Within the shores of Britain, how will we have strength and weapons to fight when we are invaded from without? Also, some of the Saxons on the treaty shores are Christians and will fight alongside us against the wild men and their heathen gods. I think, Lot says, smiling in wry amusement, that the bishops of Britain thought truly when they refused to send missionaries to save the souls of the Saxons on our shores, saying that if the Saxons were admitted to heaven, they wanted no part of it for themselves. We have enough trouble on this earth with the Saxons. Must we have their uncouth brawling in heaven as well? So he's like, really? Do we have to convert these people to Christianity? I think they're stupid for doing that. Then we'd have to deal with them in heaven as it is. We have to deal with them here. And then the Merlin speaks. The Merlin is like, okay, look, enough is enough. The Merlin sits there for quite a while. And then he's like, Jesus fucking Christ, these people. I think you mistake the nature of heaven, says a familiar voice. And Igraine felt a strange, hollow awareness within herself. She immediately knows it's the Merlin. She looked down at the table at the speaker, who wore a plain gray robe, monkish in cut. She would not have recognized the Merlin in this garb, but his voice she would have known anywhere. Do you really think mankind's quarrels and imperfections will be carried on in heaven, Lot? Good question, right? Why, as to that, I have never spoken with anyone who has been in heaven, Lot said, nor, I think, have you, Lord Merlin, but you are talking as wisely as any priest. Have you taken holy orders in your old age, sir? The Merlin laughed. So again, he's picking on Merlin because he's like, what are you, a priest now? You know all about our Christian heaven? And the Merlin laughs. He says, I have one thing in common with your priests. I have spent much time trying to separate the things of man from those that belong to the divine. And when I have done separating them, I find there is not so great a difference. Here on earth, we cannot see that, but when we have put off this body, we will know more and know that our differences make no difference at all to God. So he's like, look, it doesn't matter what our differences are here on earth. Once you get up there, the gods or your God, they look at it way differently up there. So then Uther says, well, then why are we fighting? And he's just kind of laughing and having a joke at his expense. And so he says, when we are all perfected, it will be just so. If all our differences are resolved in heaven, why do we not lay down our arms and embrace the Saxons as brethren, says Uther. And the Merlin smiles again. When we are all perfected, it will be just so, Lord Uther, but they do not know it yet, any more than we do. And while human destiny provokes men to fight, well, we must do our part by playing the games of this mortal life. But we need peace in this land so that men may think of heaven instead of battle and war. So I love that. I love that they are doing this strategy talks. And here the Merlin is like, oh my gosh, you people are just ridiculous. And there's a lot of good back and forth here. They talk about one of the Romans, Magnus Maximus. And there's a great look at, they talk about if he gets a great sword, he'll come down and be, oh, thank you, Kim. So sweet. He'll be a great warrior and a great leader if he gets this great sword. So there's, again, a portent of what's to come. We know King Arthur and Excalibur with his sword and all that stuff. There's kind of a look ahead at some of the fuzziness that is coming. And Igraine starts talking about, not talking, but thinking in her head. So Igraine's listening to all this. You're so sweet, Kim. Thank you. And she's kind of bored at these people and all of their talk and stuff, but she's, at the same time, she's like, these people are just dumb. I don't understand how they don't know what's going on. They don't understand. And she's not like the rest of the women there, though. She has been much more educated, don't forget. So the thing ends. Gorlois says, I am, Ambrosius suddenly looks super tired. And Lot, who's sitting next to him, is like, oh, look, you've tired Ambrosius out. So let's go lay down. And, they can barely get him up from the table to go lay down. Gorlois says, I'm honor bound. So he goes through, where is it? And again, why would he be worth? I think he goes, I'm trying to remember. I think he goes home. Oh, they both go home. And Gorlo, oh no, he sends her home. That's what it is. He sends her back to the house that they're staying at. Eventually, this big bell starts to toll. Gorlois comes in and says Ambrosius has died. The king is dead. And he's super upset about it. And he says there's going to be a mass now for Ambrosius. So get dressed into another dress and let's go to this mass. And they go through this mass, and Igraine sits through this awful mass that she hates, and she's getting more and more upset with the Christian church because they lament his death, and they talk about how awful it is that he could be punished when he gets there, and they are solemn, and they all this stuff, and to her, where she grew up, it was way different when they died. Not that it wasn't a sad occasion. You're very sad to have lost your brother or your father or whatever, but they talk about an opportunity. It's an opportunity to live again, to pick a new life, to learn more, to gain new knowledge. And so she's like, I don't understand these people. I don't understand why these people are the way they are. And Gorlois says, why don't you go talk to the women? She sits and tries to talk to the Lot's wife. I think it's Lot's wife. And all the other men's wives, and they're boring and stupid. Uther leaves the mass. Yes, as he hates what they're saying. Yes, Uther leaves the mass too. He's like, this is ridiculous. He leaves. She tries to talk to the wives. The wives are boring and stupid, and she can only sit there so long, and she's like, oh my gosh, she's like looking for an out. Is there any way I can back off away from these stupid idiots? So she finally does. She starts walking behind the church. There's like this little garden behind the church, and she comes upon Uther, who is weeping at sitting on the branch of a tree. And she's like, he's crying. Oh my goodness. And not to suffer after suffering. Yes. So she goes up to him and she tries to comfort him. Like, they have a wonderful, wonderful talk. And you know what? I think I'm going to save this part. Let's talk about the end of this chapter, because this chapter was so long. Let's talk about the end of this chapter, the point, because there's a lot of questions that I want to get into, and I don't want to just skip over it. But it's getting really cold out here too. And we've already gone for an hour. Let's talk about the end of this chapter. So we're going to start from when Uther and Igraine sit in the garden together. And then we'll move forward because the next chapter is only like 10 pages long. It's not as long as this one. So we will do when Uther and Igraine meet in the garden all the way through chapter 4. So next week will be chapter 4, but starting from the end of chapter 3 here, so we can really dig into and discuss everything that they, yeah, Uther and Igraine sitting in a tree. Okay, they don't kiss, but you know, they are very intimate for the time, and so there's a lot to talk about there, and I don't want to get through that. Okay, and oh yes, um, um, if you got Leanne's birthday fundraiser for the Bat Sanctuary, yes, 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 please do go and donate. I don't want to skip over anything either. And this was a long chapter, so you know, it might be that it was supposed to be into 2 parts, kind of. So we will finish up chapter 3 and we will go on to chapter 4. Now that we are in a different place and we have our RV back and stuff, keep an eye out for different videos. I'm gonna try to upload some of the deer videos tonight of us feeding the deer because I just think it's so cool. It was really super interesting. And keep an eye out. We will do more this week. I expect to do more videos this week for sure. This was a long chapter. Yep, I finished it at work today when I should have been programming. I have to fill in my program sheet for the school tomorrow, so I'll need to be creative. You know, just bullshit. That's called the art of bullshitting. All right, guys, I love you so much, and I'm so glad that we are doing this weekly. I can't tell you. I know that I have talked about doing more videos, and then like the RV broke down and all that kind of stuff. But it keeps me at least to 1 a week. But I keep meaning to do more, and I swear I'm going to be doing more. I just keep waiting for things to stop being shit. But they're done now, I swear, because Mercury's out of retrograde and things are looking up. I agree. I am loving this book. So, and I'm loving rereading it. I practically get paid to read, so I finished this chapter Friday. Yay! All right. I love you guys so much. Thank you for joining me, and I will see you soon. Good night.